Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the long game. I'm Brent Schafer. Along with me is Mr. Tyler Pearson. We are certified financial planners at HFG Trust, sharing conversations that we're having with our clients, reminding them to think about the long game. Tyler, how you doing today, buddy?
Great. Can't wait to talk about today's topic. I think it's going to be beneficial for the listeners.
I like to hear it. I like to hear it. We're getting excited about today's topic. So what we've got today, so JP Morgan, they've got a bunch of different guides. It's actually quite a valuable resource for us as advisors, but they just refreshed and gave a presentation on the guide to retirement. So typically, Tyler, I'm using a lot of the guide to the market slides that, they update pretty much daily, but different stuff here. We've got guide to retirement. And so the one that I picked out that I want to talk about today is the retirement equation. What it outlines here is things that we have control over, total control over, things that we have some control over, and then things that are out of our control. And as advisors, we're having to work with people and assist them in navigating their life, right? And there are things that happen that obviously we've got control over, and then there are things that are totally out of our control. Here we are recording in 2026, and you can kind of see that there's a lot of things that are out of our control. And this slide, I think, just helps to generally frame what that looks like in retirement. We'll put the graphic up so that people can see it, but what are your initial thoughts when you take a look at this?
Yeah. I mean, to start with, I think I love the way that they just give two examples because I think it's really easy to walk through and kind of highlight the point of the story. But it is also important to recognize that there's more things that are out of our control than just market returns and taxing and benefits policy. But I typically like to start with what's out of our control. I think it's hard as humans to accept that some things are out of our control, right? Just in the finance area, you see people who really believe that, they know something's going to happen. A certain stock's going to do really well, whatever it might be. Now they might be right, but the reality is they're not the manager of that company. They can't predict what's going to happen in that industry. So I always start with market returns. I think that's something that a lot of people recognize, that the market's cyclical. We don't know what it's going to do year to year. And so it's a good baseline to kind of accept that if you're going to take on the volatility risk that comes with investing, that market returns are out of our control, but we know what history tells us. And then tax and benefits policy, we do get to vote, for who's in Congress, right? Who's in the Senate, but we don't ultimately get to make decisions on how they rule on tax law and things like that. Is there anything that you like to add on the out of your control part?
Yeah, I think, again, we always talk about hindsight being 2020 with tax and benefits policy, right? You play the rules of the game, or excuse me, you play the game with the rules that you have today. So sometimes we have changes in tax laws, changes in policies that, man, 10, 15 years ago, nobody would have recommended that strategy. And here we are today, totally different strategy. I always like to say that's job security for you and me, just to keep up on that and recommend what we can do to kind of get around some of those things. As much as things are out of our control, there are ways that we can plan around it and factor that into the plan so it becomes a little bit more into our control. You touched on market returns, and if somebody's pulling off of their portfolio, okay, we're probably not going to have 100% invested in the markets. That is extremely volatile, or probably one of the more volatile asset classes that you can own. We're going to have maybe some of the money that we can afford to have at risk be in the market, and then the other portion that we're going to live off of is out of the market, and it's in a safer environment, so it's not at risk. So as much as in our control, out of our control, we can plan around these things and kind of have some control over them. Let's talk about total control, like what we can actually control as human beings. So spending versus saving, asset allocation, and location. You want to take a stab at that real quick, and then I'll.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's funny because they play out of control and control, right? Kind of play off of each other. We don't have control over what the broad market does, but like you kind of alluded to, we do have total control over what portion of what markets we choose to be involved in or choose to invest our dollars in, which, we can look at historical data to tell us what's likely to happen, going forward, or kind of set our expectations as investors, or for us, set expectations for clients as to what does the ride look like. And so it's important, I think, to spend a lot of time as an individual, as a financial advisor, focusing on the things that you have total control over. right? Because we can control and make sure that you're in a safe, appropriate asset allocation where we're confident that you're going to be able to reach your goals. Saving versus spending is a huge one, right? If you're spending more than what your portfolio is going to be able to maintain, that's an easy place to look and go, hey, we have control over our spending. Let's knock it down $1,000 a month, and then we can model that and say, hey, actually, things look great if you knock it down $1,000 a month. Whereas if you're sitting there, fingers crossed that the market's going to do great for 5 years, I don't think that's a very sound plan.
Yeah, correct. And then I think the other thing is we were talking about before the call is having a big portfolio, a nice big backstop that can kind of weather some of that storm. I mean, we don't like to say that money is equivalent to happiness, but it can definitely smooth over and solve some problems from every now and again. And then some control. So employment, earnings, and duration, how long you work, what you make. Gosh, I think it was a tweet from Elon that was going around LinkedIn, but it's basically like, what's harder, cutting expenses by 10 grand or making 10 grand more? And, generally, I mean, if we're still humans, we have to eat, we got to have shelter, some of these basic things that we need. Eventually you get to a point where you can't cut your expenses anymore. Employment, earnings, and duration, work longer, try to find those opportunities where you can increase your value and potentially earn a little bit more. And then longevity, there's that as well. And I guess as you're planning for retirement, can kind of be a opposing goals, right? If you live longer, you're going to have a bigger portfolio to support yourself in retirement. But
yeah, I saw a post that I think you reposted on LinkedIn of a guy who said he'd achieved early retirement. He just set his retirement plan for him to only live one more year. So unfortunately, that's probably not the ideal goal for most people. But you have control over, how you eat. Are you exercising? So you have some idea of what your longevity might be. You don't have control over, freak accidents, things like that. So yeah, definitely. Sorry, I kind of cut you off, but.
Oh, no worries. I was waiting for you to bail me out. Going back to what you said I set my retirement date for a year and I have achieved that. We use tools. We take the information. So here's the statements. Here's how big your nest egg is. Here's where you're at today, how long you're looking to live, and what you're willing to spend. Tools are only as good as the person who is using it, right? We can make any retirement analysis look great. Yeah, spend $1 a month and you only live for, 5 more years after retirement. Like that scenario passes. It's that expertise of going through those situations, going through the scenarios, being, I think, old enough as young advisors, right, to bring it up to your clients of like, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, this isn't sustainable. You tell me, we come in here and we have these annual reviews and you tell me that you're spending $10,000 a month. Our distribution rate, everything says that, no, you're not doing that. It's $15,000 a month. So where's it going to be? And I think you can have advisors that are yes men and, hey, here's your portfolio and thanks for coming in. But I view it as our kind of duty to, one, set people up for investment success, but two, just to be their guide as kind of they're going through these things and point out those potential pitfalls. And
Right.
yeah, I mean, everybody, I hate to just go through line by line budgeting with people, but sometimes there's a point for it and sometimes there's not. And it's just being that person in their corner that brings up those things. So
Yeah.
Anyway, any thoughts you want to add?
Yeah, I think you're kind of hitting it on the spheres. We're counseling people through all of these different things. And part of that is recognizing with clients who are going to be wrapped up. It's much more emotional when it's your own retirement plan, your own portfolio, right? Even for us, yeah, we have expertise, but when it comes to our own personal situation, we're going to have some more bias because we're, talking about our own stuff. So I look at it as kind of counseling people through what makes sense from an asset allocation for you. What are you really spending? What do you think you're spending? Now let's talk through, is that realistic? If employment is something where it's like, hey, I love my job, but I don't feel like I'm making enough money to achieve my goals. It's talking through the pros and cons of what that looks like. And then highlighting for people from the first meeting through, all the meetings that we'll have with them over the lifetime of them being a client. It's, hey, these things really are out of your control, right? And putting that into a bucket of going, we can't control these, but we're going to do everything that's in our control to make sure that the things that we can't control don't end up hurting, your plan or devastating your plan, and kind of walking them through, what that experience is going to look like. Cause it's not as smooth as I think people would like it to be. I'd love for the market averages 8 to 10 or 8 to 12%. I'd love if it just did 8 to 12% every year, but we both know that's not the reality. So how do we set up, a portfolio and a financial plan for someone that, number one, helps them accomplish their goals, but number two, allows them to put their head on the pillow and actually fall asleep at night.
Yeah. And last week we chatted about top 5 myths, right? Regarding financial advisors. And last one we closed out with was, are they really worth the fee? Or actually, as a myth would be, they're not worth the fee. As you were talking through that, and we meet with our client annually, and that gives us opportunity to get ahead of problems before they become really big problems, right? As much as we should be going to our doctor annually, Jocelyn loves to poke fun at, like, I called it meet with my primary care physician being a 30-year-old male, which they're just perplexed that I even do that because guys don't go to the doctor. But, how many problems could be prevented by just, hey, doing those periodic check-ins, and man, something looks a little off here. Okay, let's just make that slight adjustment, because that's really what it is. If you set a plan and have it be your guiding document for 40, 50 years, it's really going to diminish and it's going to degrade over time. And the recommendations in it are not going to be worth it because things change. So anyway, I think I'm continuing to go down the rabbit hole. Let's just shut it down. We did talk about that before the recording was on, that this could go a multitude of different ways, but we'll just shut it down here. And I think just remind people of what can you control totally, what do you have some control over, and kind of accept the fact that sometimes there are things that are out of our control, but we have the ability to plan around them and we can factor them in. And unfortunately, sometimes you got to go with the flow, roll with the punches, and we can't plan for every situation, but once we're going through it, we can make adjustments. So
yeah, no, absolutely.
On the screws. Perfect. Well, thank you for tuning in, everybody. This has been The Long Game. And, if you want my information or Tyler's information, we'll put it in the show notes. We'll post it. Look us up on LinkedIn, look us up on Facebook, hfgtrust.com, and we'll see you next time.